YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Time for Outsiders, and I think First Dog on the Moon will be back today as well.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy and you're not. So is Outsiders this week are Susan Harris-Rimmer. She's from the Asia Pacific College of Diplomacy at the ANU. Andrew Heslop joins you as well, social entrepreneur, Neighbour Day founder. And Ian Hankey, he's a former political advisor to the Howard government, now runs his own consultancy. I should give you the relevant Twitter handles. They are at Femint for Susan, at Andrew Heslop for Andrew. Andrew, you must have got in early.
I did. I was an earlier adopter.
As was Ian Hankey, who has at Ian Hankey. Well done, all of you. And of course, we are at RN Sunday Extra. The hashtag is ABCRN, and I'm even at GreenJ. There you go. Dangerous ideas. Tusk, tusk, tusk. Here's one in play.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. What is going on here? I demand an explanation.
This clumsy fool tried to plant that ridiculous camera on me.
You bet your sweets, Mr. Commie. Look at this, Mr. President. This lousy commie rat was taking pictures with this thing on the big board. Mr. Ambassador.
This clumsy fool attempted to plant that ridiculous camera on me.
That's a damn lie. I saw him with my own eyes. Gentlemen, this is outrageous. I have never heard of such behavior in the war room before.
Yes, indeed. You can't fight in the war room. What better way to describe this week's kerfuffle over the Festival of Dangerous Ideas? Wolf Mumbarda wanted to give a presentation on, I don't think we should call them honour killings. I think we should simply call them murder. But it's certainly a dangerous idea. Susan, should he have been stopped from giving that presentation?
I think he had a triumph of marketing, really, or a disaster of marketing. Having had a look now at his website and at his previous speeches, that wasn't really what he was arguing. He was arguing that the West likes to hear stories about these particular issues without much context, and so it gives a bad impression of Islam. So that it was more about the relationship of the West to Islam, and that's probably an idea worth listening to, but the way it focused around that particular issue, if it was in fact in substance something that said honour killing was okay, then that probably, legally speaking, would be not acceptable.
Andrew, what's dangerous these days anyway? I mean, this feeds into this other discussion we've been having about freedom of speech and, you know, the clarifying antiseptic of discussion. We should be able to talk about anything, shouldn't we?
I think it's the danger of marketing, because if this event had been held in the Great Hall at the University of Sydney, rather than the iconic Sydney Opera House, I don't think we'd be having this discussion this morning, because the university would have been felt to be the natural place to have such a contentious discussion, unpalatable as it may be for a number of people.
Important to have those discussions, though. I mean,
absolutely.
I think the speech should have gone ahead. I think the lecture should have gone ahead. I'm in no two minds about that. From what I can understand, yes, it was trying to put some sort of context around the relationship between Islam and the West. That seems post-event spin to me. But nevertheless, I think it should have actually gone ahead. There has been a lot of media coverage already about these sorts of issues within the context of the Australian community, about these so-called honour killings, which I agree with you are murders. And I think it should have been discussed and debated and brought to the fore, because whilst these things do occur, it's got to be debated. You can't fix these things and without it actually being brought to the fore. So I think it should have actually gone ahead.
And so much, Susan, of the difficulties around the relationship between Islam and broader Australia come through, ignorance or the lack of discussion.
Well, I think there's a point that the way a lot of these issues are covered tend to be very exotic and talking about the other, and instead of getting into really what are we going to do to prevent such crimes as we would any other type of crime.
Exactly.
So that's really important. But I also think there's probably a difference between a ticketed event where you would have to pay money and choose to go to that lecture in order to be outraged, if you know what I mean, and something which is a public broadcast. It's really, some of these issues are a question of taste, but in terms of the legal situation, I probably agree. But this is why we have universities, so that you can discuss difficult things in a safe and respectful way. And probably a public event is not always that sort of space.
I would fundamentally disagree with this. It shouldn't be within just necessarily the confines of a university. It is a public issue. It should be debated in public. There is no problems with it being debated at a ticketed event or at a lecture hall at a university. If you're going to have a discussion about these sorts of things, or if you're going to bring it to the public fore, there's nothing wrong with being in the public medium, in the public forum. I don't have any difficulties with that.
How do we guard, though, Andrew? I mean, this is another sort of marketing, I guess, but it's a sort of a media question maybe around these things. How do we guard against those public discussions being ripped off the rails and pushed in sort of antagonistic directions?
I think you've got to have stronger people who are running the event, certainly, because I agree.
Courage.
That's right, and I agree with Ian. I mean, I think the event should have gone ahead. Now, you know, the Opera House obviously has a different perspective on that because they allegedly said, look, we're not comfortable with this. But, you know, as an event planner, having done this for a career, I mean, these are the kind of things you talk through with the venue that you want to hire, and this is what we're going to put on our program, and then they can say, well, yes or no.
It's possible to
post-event, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Or possible to the event organisers push the boat out a little bit in the publicity, trying to be out there, trying to be controversial,
Trying to whip up social media.
I wonder but Susan, I mean, the very nature, the very fact that we have a festival of dangerous ideas, does that not say something that something is lacking in our normal sort of public discourse? Is that in itself, is there an implication that political correctness is a bit out of hand if we need a special festival where we can talk about risky things?
I don't think so. I think it's a sign of a thriving democracy if you can have a ticketed festival of dangerous ideas. I think it's a good sign. I think the idea that our democracy is mature enough to allow that type of debate is excellent. I just think perhaps we really aren't actually very comfortable with really dangerous ideas. We're probably more comfortable with
What makes a
liberalism
dangerous idea? Has anybody got a dangerous idea they'd like to express right now?
Well, if you surf around the radio dial and, you know, tune away from some of the ABC stations and go and have a listen to commercial talk radio, you'll find probably a lot of dangerous ideas that are dangerous to your own space and place in the world.
Challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's where I forged my career as a baby journalist. But, you know, you don't necessarily have to agree with what they say, but I think it's important to actually be able to hear it.
It's always important to be challenged.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things I find working in politics is people get so trapped in their rut of their own ideas that they are not open to any other ideas. And, you know, and that's very disappointing on either side of politics in the areas that
I guess my point is that should happen without the necessity of a festival. You know, if we actually had a healthy sort of public conversation, we'd have that challenge.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Well, except the modern media cycle is focusing on reacting. It's reactive. So, I mean, I think the types of these festivals are, you know, what's the next big thing? What's the thing you're not talking about now that's not in the media now? It's what might be coming up. I mean, I think that's very useful to have something that's forecasting. But I do think the media cycle is incredibly reactive, and it's very hard to get structural ideas into the media. So if you want to talk, unless you're Stiglitz, if you want to talk about economic inequality, you know, something that's not linked to a particular daily event or a particular something terrible a politician has said, it's very difficult.
And maybe a festival of safe ideas just wouldn't get off the ground.
We specialise in academia in fairly boring ideas or abstract ideas.
Radio National should next week.
Festival of safe ideas.
Well, the festival of comfortable ideas.
And everybody has carpet slippers and dressing gown and open fire.
Sounds like the Drive program.
Pound at your feet.
That's a very lovely idea. This is Outsiders, the weekly festival of, I'm not sure what sort of ideas they are, the weekly festival of ideas. 13 minutes away from 10. You're listening to Susan Harris-Rimmer, Andrew Heslop and Ian Hankey. And speaking of dangerous ideas, Ian, I was gobsmacked, I must admit, this week when we had that rather strange coupling on the public stage.
Mr. Gore and Mr. Palmer. Now, that's a duo that you're not likely to ever see again.
Well, I suspect ever see again is probably... I'm not sure that Mr. Gore, on reflection,
no,
he'll be racing back for an encore.
I mean, it was really one of those extraordinary things that some elements of the media got very excited about it. I saw that one said, well, Mr. Abbott has now been wedged over the Green issue, and masterstroke by Palmer, but at the end...
There's something for everyone.
There's something for everybody, but it sort of reminded me of a gift box that you get. It's beautifully wrapped, and then you open it up, expecting something in there, and suddenly it's a box of nothing. I mean, Abbott got what he wanted, abolition of the carbon tax. The renewable energy target is now, according to Palmer, only going to be in play on a permanent basis until 2016, when he'll review it.
I mean, out of it, we get no carbon tax. We probably get no direct action.
Exactly.
So we get and we certainly don't get the ETS that Clive was talking about.
Because nothing is dependent. So suddenly, after I thought it was masterful stroke, but really it was just there's no substance to it.
It's pretty remarkable, Susan. I mean, and Ian alluded to it there. The way in which there was that event, and then the coverage went every which way. It just rode off in every conceivable direction, and media completely flummoxed by whatever might have happened.
Well, it's the power of a visual, isn't it? Because we associate people standing next to Al Gore with climate legitimacy.
No, but the job of a hack is to actually see through that. And I think what we saw with this week was journalists interpreting events as they wanted to see them, rather than actually listening and viewing what was really going on. And it wasn't until the thing was washed over 48 hours later that people started to see the actual reality of it.
Andrew?
Well, to be honest, too, there's some strange dynamics going on here. I mean, I have enough respect for Al Gore to think that there was a broader strategy here, and I think the strategy was that he wanted to keep the renewable energy targets on the finance agency, and they were important. And I think it's very interesting that he chose Clive Palmer out of all the Australian Parliament to go and talk to. So there's strategy there. I mean, Al Gore is a good strategist, so there was an idea there, and finding out whether it worked or not, it might take a little bit more time.
And I think that's right. I mean, of all of the things that have come out of that pairing this week, there are two things that hit home for me. One is that Clive Palmer is just so random. I mean, it is that magic box of tricks. Like every time there's seemingly a different side to him, and you'd just kill to see a psychological profile of him drop out of the sky from somewhere.
I think there's a core of belief which goes pretty much to what's good for Clive.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And up until that point, I had no idea that Al Gore was even in Australia. So it certainly gives marks to his marketing team.
Was an interesting element did come out of it, just in the straight politics of it, and that is that there is a division within the Palmer United Party. D.O. Wang, during the Senate by-election campaign in Western Australia, was saying the RET had to be mandatory, as it is now, whereas Palmer slapped him down and said, no, it is a voluntary, we will have a voluntary RET. Now, what's clearly happened is that the dynamics within the party room moved a little bit, and so it's interesting that Mr. Palmer couldn't actually enforce his own personal discipline on the rest of the party room. I think that's a very interesting development.
Once the pressure really comes on in the Senate too, we're going to see a lot more of things.
Exactly.
Let's not forget they're not even in the House.
No, exactly. So I think this was from my perspective, I think that was very important, very interesting.
We're certainly going to watch this with it. And speaking of the Senate, I should say we're about to hear First Dog on the Moon's guide to the new incumbents in the upper house, which is utterly unmissable. And I need to tell you too that Simon Longstaff, who runs the St James Ethics Centre, but is also the man behind the Festival of Dangerous Ideas, informs us via Twitter that the full background to that honour killing, aka murder session that we were discussing before, will be published tomorrow at the ABC Online Religion and Ethics portal, so that will be worth a read to get the full story there of what might have happened at the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. And that, I'm afraid, is all we have time for in our discussion this morning. Your outsiders have been Susan Harris-Rimmer. She's from the Asia Pacific College of Diplomacy at the ANU. Find her on Twitter at Femint. Andrew Heslop, social entrepreneur, Neighbour Day founder. You can find him at Andrew Heslop. And Ian Hankey, former advisor and now a political and media consultant. You can find him at Ian Hankey. It's 13 minutes. Oh, no, it's not. Idiot. It's 8 minutes. 8 minutes away from 10 o'clock.
Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist for The Guardian, First Dog on the Moon. On July 7, a whole mob of new senators makes their way into the Senate to plunge their snouts deep into the trough of taxpayer largesse for the next 7 years. A ragtag crew of pampered, self-indulgent, ideological good-for-nothings who nobody really voted for, getting ready to change the future of Australia. But enough about the Greens. Will our precious democracy become a circus held hostage by single-issue sociopaths, even more than usual? How will Emperor Tony navigate the already smoking ruin of our democracy through to safer waters? Well, first things first. We need to understand which party is who and how many of they are there. Here's a list. Write this down, Australia. It's sure to come in handy. First up is the We Invented Mandatory Detention Party, aka the ALP, the opposition, and also those stupid bastards who managed to bugger it up last time. They have 25 senators, which is a lot, but not enough. Then we have the no longer balance of power and not quite sure what to do about it party. They have 10 senators, although only 6 of those are fair trade organic. The rest are 20,000 chickens to the hectare. What a disgrace. We have the Democratic Labour Liberal Democrats Party, whose platform includes stopping the Zionist peas that are in league with the tinfoil manufacturers and the radioactive sticky tape dispensers at the heart of the one world government. They only have 1 senator, but it's a good one. And then there's the similarly named but completely different Liberal Democratic Labour Party, whose platform is climate change isn't real, but it is a sin. They have 1 very enthusiastic spittle-flecked senator. There's the, oh, for God's sake, it's bloody Nick Xenophon again party, and they have 1 senator who is bloody Nick Xenophon. Look, he's a lovely bloke, but come on. There's the Family Fist. They have 1 senator, and interestingly, their platform includes a space program. They want to implement geostationary satellite death rays above Australia's abortion clinics, far more effective than a mob of weird old ladies with fetus posters in the car park. Then there's the I Just Really Love Cars party, who want a new public holiday declared for National Marsupial Bum Raids and Tossing Day, a day to celebrate Australia's unique native wildlife by throwing their poo about and then running them over. Their senator is Randy Muckrake, and he's in a loose coalition with the Clive Palmer Psychedelic Love Train Experience Party. Oh yeah, the Clive man brings the crazy. Clive's the guy who said the Greens were working with the CIA and Wendy Deng was a Chinese spy. Who knew? Clive got Al Gore over here to help announce he was going to kill the carbon tax. That's like inviting the chickens to speak at the press conference where the fox announces improvements to henhouse security. No, it's like asking Scott Morrison to speak at a press conference for Torture Awareness Week. Well, hey, even a broken clock is right twice a day. It's not exactly 50% of the time, but what are a few jumper leads on your testicles between friends? Now, in order to pass legislation, the government will need the support of 6 or more senators, and in order to continue their efforts to destroy this country, the ALP will need the support of the Greens and 4 other senators, plus half a kilo of boiled new potatoes and a cup of grated Gruyere cheese. Melt butter in a frying pan, add eggs and sprinkle with cumin and a drizzle of olive oil. Serve with a light dusting of rocket quinoa albino creme fraiche. Delicious. Here's one we prepared earlier. Clive will say and do whatever he wants, whenever he likes. when he thinks it is to his benefit. One day he says one thing, the next day he says another. So my question to you listeners is, how is this actually different from what the government does? It's not that different at all. Black is up, white is down, no promises were broken, no lies told, we won't cut this, oh wait, we're cutting everything. How different? The only difference is that Clive doesn't even pretend to care what people think, and he isn't in government. Or is he? Truth is over, people. You missed it. Go back and have a look on iView if you want to remember what it was like, or get the DVD boxed set at the ABC shop. Thanks for listening, Patriot. Oh, sorry, wrong button. Thanks for listening, Patriots. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, proudly brought to you by the First Dog on the Moon Institute.
Okay, and because the budgie smuggling wingnut government plan to stop the boats has been getting so much airplay about how so successful it's been in stopping the boats coming from Indonesia, just at the moment Scott Morrison has been struck dumb. He can't find anything to say because there's a boatload of Tamils coming from southern India. Now you can't take them back to Indonesia and push them back across the border, can you? Different boat people from a different bloody country. They're not even coming from Sri Lanka. They're Tamils running away from southern India. I wonder if the budgie smuggling wingnut and Greg Hunt, Scott Morrison between them, have got the balls to have a blue with India. Let's listen to the news, eh?
News with John Hall. The lawyer for the family of a 17-year-old believed to have left Sydney to fight in Iraq says they're devastated and want him home. Saley Burrows represents Abdullah Almer's family. She says the teenager left his Bankstown home in the city's southwest over a week ago and has since called his mother from Turkey. He told her he was about to cross the border and she understood that meant he was heading to Iraq. Miss Burrows says the family had no idea he was considering fighting in Iraq.
The family had no inkling whatsoever. They just thought he just goes off and does the normal activities like fishing, because the last thing the family heard was that he had gone fishing. They had absolutely no idea. But then again, who knows what their teenagers are up to or what they're watching online or what their influences are.
The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade says the federal government's particularly concerned about reports that youths are travelling to conflict zones. But DFAT says it doesn't confirm consular cases. It says there's been a further withdrawal of Australian officials from the embassy in Baghdad and consular assistance isn't available in Iraq. The federal opposition says it's disappointed by the government's response to a report critical of the Australian Securities and Investment Commission and the Commonwealth Bank. A Senate inquiry slammed the corporate watchdog's handling of rogue financial planners working for the CBA and recommended a royal commission. The Finance Minister Matthias Cormann has indicated a royal commission is unlikely, but the government's still considering the report's recommendations. The Shadow Treasurer, Chris Bowen, has criticised the response so far.
The government's response to this has been very disappointing. For Matthias Cormann to say he found the 6-page dissenting report persuasive over the more than 500 pages in the substantial report was, I think, offensive to the victims of this scandal.
A man's died in a unit fire in Sydney southeast overnight, as Lucy McNally reports.
Just before 1 o'clock this morning, firefighters were called to a single-storey apartment block at Decenber. Crews put the blaze out, but it was too late for a man in his 40s. He died at the scene. The apartment block was evacuated, but no one else was hurt. Half an hour later, a fire broke out at St Clair High in Sydney's west. Commissioner Greg Mullins from New South Wales Fire and Rescue says crews arrived to find huge plumes of smoke.
They had to break entry. It was very difficult for them to get in. When they got inside, they found a 2-storey building well alight.
The fire has gutted the science block and canteen. Police are urging witnesses to come forward.
The New South Wales State Emergency Service says it's had a busy 24 hours clearing.
Now what that means is the ABC has censored its 10 o'clock Sunday morning news broadcast to the tune where it has no mention of the 300 Tamils, refugees from southern India who are on a boat, leaking oil, stranded off the coast of Christmas Island. Apparently Australian Customs, this is according to last night and early morning bulletins today, Australian Customs have been dispatched, and Scott Morrison says that he doesn't comment on anything unless it's really significant involving loss of life, and he is advised that he has no reports of anything like that to make public. So whereas all last week and maybe for a month, Tony Abbott's cohort have been claiming that they've stopped the boats, and now Clive Palmer has paid Al Gore to stand on a podium beside him, much in the same way that Jamie McIntyre paid Arnold Schwarzenegger and Richard Branson to stand on a podium beside him when he was talking about his 21st century education finance advisory scams. So these big name, internationally recognisable, high profile faces, they are available at a price if you're a business person who has deep enough pockets. So apparently Clive Palmer paid Al Gore to come to Australia and stand up there on a podium and pat Clive Palmer on the back for axing Australia's carbon tax for Tony Abbott. So that's a bit exciting. It's given Tony Abbott a backdoor which allows him to keep the renewable energy target and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and a few other things, that it's good to have them there, because even the liberal side of politics is surely coming to understand that global warming is happening, climate science is not absolute crap, and it doesn't really matter how much political support you've got for the idea of disemploying all the scientists at the CSIRO, failing to do the research, not logging the data, doesn't stop the climate from changing. It doesn't stop the globe from warming. It doesn't stop the science from being correct. The politics doesn't actually friggin' matter at this point. The weather gods hate Tony Abbott. Personally, right at the moment, I'm fairly ecstatic because I had 11 millimetres of rain yesterday. It's kind of interrupted my burning program, but only for a day or two, because we've got the wind now and we've got cold nights. It'll dry out again. And permit season starts on August the 1st, because that's now the new date, not the 1st of September. It's permanently been brought forward by a month. Think about that. What does that say for the opponents of climate science? The fact that the New South Wales RFS has permanently advanced the bushfire permit season by a month in northern New South Wales. Because that's how much hotter the climate in Australia already is. Bit sad if you're a dyed-in-the-wool liberal supporter and apparatchik, isn't it? Because business as usual is not actually an option. And China has been reducing the number of coal-fired power stations it builds ever since 2007, because China doesn't want coal-fired electricity. So, life's getting worse for Tony Abbott and his government. They appear to have very, very sexy hands, in the sense that everything they touch, they fuck. In the sense of forced unlawful carnal knowledge, which was the original British legal charge, which when acronymed down becomes the Anglo-Saxon expletive. At least so I was taught in English lessons in 1976 by a Catholic priest. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.